In progress. And I'm going to start sharing my screens, my screen and my slides. All right. Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining. This is the second of this deep dive series into Iris Plus themes. This was developed really to have a space to go through the incredible content we have across the 18 impact themes and lenses in Iris Plus in a space beyond our normal launch webinar that is a point in time. We want to continue to keep this content alive. So that is the focus of this series on our newest theme, climate adaptation and resilience. So today you will be hearing from myself and Oishi, our Senior Manager of Framework and Theme Development at the GIIN. I am also joined by our team members, our Director Panayota and our Associate Grace, and they are both in the chat. We'll be here for the Q&A as anything comes up. So our actual presentation will take you through both Iris Plus and then the a bit more information on the development of the climate adaptation and resilience theme. Our objective for this session is really for everyone to walk away with a better understanding of this theme, how it was developed and structured, and how it can be used. I know we have a range of people with different experiences today, both in terms of the sector and with Iris Plus. So I want you all to walk away feeling confident and able to use this on your own time. So the presentation portion will take about 30 minutes, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So feel free as we go along to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. And then, of course, once we reach the end, you can unmute and share them out loud. So let's get into our slides. So first, what is Iris Plus and what is in Iris Plus? So for those of you who are newer to our Iris Plus community, this is a list of all of the tools and guidance that exist on the Iris Plus website. Grace, in her reminder email she sent out to all of you Monday, included a link and some instructions for creating your Iris Plus account. Strongly encourage you all to do that if you haven't already. It is completely free and a very easy name, email, organization, registration process. And our focus today is on our themes and this specific climate adaptation and resilience theme. We currently have 18 impact themes and lenses across various environmental and social sectors. And these are all created with expert non-investing partners, including the ILO for Quality Jobs and the WWF Netherlands for Biodiversity. And then coming up in the pipeline, you see this CAR is the acronym for Climate Adaptation and Resiliences, which we might shout out incidentally. And apologies if we slip into too much jargon, but that is the acronym CAR. Launched in December. This was funded by Omidyar Network India, and our theme partner was Winrock International. And the next themes coming up are marine resources conservation and management, which will be open for public which just wrapped our public comment period and will be publishing in Iris Plus in June. It's coming up very soon as well. And following that will be waste management. And the beta working paper version of that will launch in September and will be open for public comment period from all of you for 2 months, and then we'll be in Iris Plus in December as well. So what is in the CAR theme specifically? So as I mentioned, it was created with Winrock International and the support of Omidyar Network India, and engaged over 100 working group members at different points in the process, from consultative calls to reviews of documents. Wish you'll touch on more of that later. But this is what we all created together, which are 4 new strategic goals. You can see the names of those here. 20 new outcomes, and 8 new IRIS metrics, which were used in combination with 55 existing IRIS metrics to create 83 indicators across those 4 strategic goals. Now, all of IRIS Plus's metrics, as well as supportive thematic content, draw from existing standards, especially in the specific sector they're based in. So you can see here some of the leading industry experts in the climate adaptation and resilience space that the CAR IRIS Plus content was deeply informed by. So as I mentioned, there are 20 outcomes across those 4 strategic goals, and here is a list of all of them that just capture different pathways investors working in the wider CAR space are aiming to achieve impact. All right, and that is the end of our slides. I'm going to now pause and share my IRIS Plus screen and get into what this content looks like in action. So if you have already created your IRIS Plus account, you will know that this is what the homepage looks like. Our catalog of now 738 metrics is available right here in the footer. It has a search bar, a downloadable Excel version, as well as filters that you can use to get to specific SDGs or theme areas. We have comprehensive coverage across the UN SDGs and their targets. We have coverage across 12 of the SDGs and 27 targets for the 8 new CAR metrics. And the 4 strategic goals are directly linked to 5 SDGs and indirectly linked to 7. And of course, SDG 13, climate action, is one of those. So let's build our framework. This is the tool that allows you to get to the CAR content we are referencing in addition to those metrics. So first, we will name our framework.
I'm here.
Today's date. And then you have the option to go in either through the SDGs, as I mentioned, or through the impact categories and themes in our taxonomy. So here you will see all of the categories available. We'll of course click climate. And we actually have 2 themes within the climate category in IRIS Plus, the other being climate change mitigation. This theme originally launched in 2021, but actually just went through a round of refreshing statistics and resources used, thanks to Grace, to keep that information as up to date as possible, so that statistic and resourcing refresh was just launched in February, so very up to date. But for now, of course, we'll be selecting climate adaptation and resilience. You do have the option within IRIS Plus to add a cross-cutting lens, which applies content from these cross-category areas across any other theme you choose. In this case, we have developed racial equity. For now, we will pass that to keep it to CAR. And you will notice here there are more strategic goals listed than the 4 I showed you on the slides. And this is because there are many existing areas of overlapping content developed for previous themes as we continue to grow and build out our thematic taxonomy. So in this case, like improving job skills for the future was a theme originally created under our quality jobs theme, but that has a lot of relevance to climate adaptation and resilience, and so appears here as well. For today, we will be selecting the goals created under CAR, which are improving household resilience to flood risk, improving power systems resilience, improving the capacity of communities to adapt to climate risk, and increasing agricultural resilience through technology. That is all we have to do to get to our framework. So you'll see here each of the goals we selected has its own tab you can toggle between. At the top, the download button gets you an Excel version of the content in your framework. And the share button creates a publicly available link to take anyone you're working with directly to the framework you created, whether or not they have an IRIS Plus account. The framework builder is only available behind that free login wall. I'm actually going to add this link to the chat if it is useful to follow along. So now we see in our summary tab, we have the 100-word version of the aim of this goal, improving the capacity of communities to adapt to climate risk. We have our glossary terms linked. And then we have those SDG direct and indirect links in helpful icons right here. Our overview tab is a narrative summary. So based on the best available information right now, what does impact look like in the car space and how can investors aim to drive change here? You'll see that this is structured around the 5-dimension of impact questions, which is the what, who, how much, contribution, and risk of your investment. And then we end with some examples of investors currently working in the space. So I do find that this can be incredibly useful for impact investors who might be newer to the climate adaptation and resilience space, or on the flip side, for climate investors who may be newer to impact specifically. So we can just take a look at that. Again, plenty of glossary terms linked throughout with their sources. Then we get into our evidence section, which is where we connect peer-reviewed and academic literature to those different outcomes we saw before in the slides. So see here, these are the pathways that were selected for improving the capacity of community to adapt to climate risk. And we'll see that these pieces of literature are graded according to the rigor of their study and the NESTA scoring system, which you can read more about there. And going to go to the bottom right now to resources before we get into the meat of the core metric set. But our resources section is a collated set of resources from leading experts in the climate adaptation and resilience space. I do find this specifically useful for the climate themes because of the complexity of measuring carbon output or GHG emissions. Just carbon calculation tools may be found here and may be especially useful for calculating your impact. That can be a more complex or nuanced approaches I'm sure you are all familiar with than perhaps other sector data collection that might be a bit more straightforward. So that all lives here, and then I'll go back to the core metric set. This is really the star of our show because this is where we contextualize all of those metrics, the 8 new car metrics and the 50+ existing metrics into indicators that live in this set of indicators. You'll see here, this is also mapped to the 5 dimensions of impact: the what, who, how much, contribution, and risk. And then we have the additional how is change happening and additional metric section. So these are different pathways investors might be working in the car space or other metrics that sit a bit outside of those key 5-dimension questions, but that can be incredibly useful and relevant here. And these can be added as is relevant to your specific investment practice. So, sorry for the scrolling. We'll see in our drop-down indicators, you have the list of metrics that is needed here. And each metric has its own pop-up. There is a mix of qualitative and quantitative metrics in Iris Plus. If this was a quantitative metric, you would see its definition here, its calculation here. Since this is a qualitative metric, you see its definition. So damage to infrastructure describes the projected loss of value of infrastructure due to climate change, disasters, or extreme weather events. You can click through to the metric landing page to see even more information, such as the SDG target tags. All right, so we see for calculating this indicator, the value of climate resilient community infrastructure, we need IRIS metrics: damage to infrastructure, value of community infrastructure, climate vulnerability status, and community facilities types. And then we have the step-by-step calculation guidance for calculating this particular outcome for this particular measure using these 4 metrics. And we also have some usage guidance and other considerations listed here. You will also find some industry certifications or references that may be helpful additional context for this metric. All right, and that is actually the full framework and the core metric set. As a reminder, you can download an Excel version of the core metric set for easier use for your investment practice. And that is the end of our IRS Plus overview. So I will stop sharing my screen now and allow Oishi to zoom out and get more into the background of how all of this content we just did a brief overview of was created.
Thanks so much, Kellen. Am I audible? Great. Thank you for all of you for being such a wonderful audience. And I see we have a chat going on, and feel free to engage again on the chat with each other, as well as if you have any questions, ask them anytime. And definitely we have a Q&A right after I'll wrap up. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Oishi, and I lead theme development for Iris Plus. And I'd like to start out by just taking a step back and helping you understand how this collaboration happens with various contributors we engage with to develop an Iris Plus theme, starting first with our theme partner. So our theme partners, as Kellen has pointed out, are topic experts who lead the creation of an individual Iris Plus theme. And theme partners bring in and engage a strong group of experts that helps us co-create this content. And these experts are essentially our working group, and they meet monthly for a span of over 1 to 1.5 years to collaborate on the development of metrics and theme content. These metrics are not just limited to the working group. We also go through various rounds of consultation with stakeholders beyond the working group in different capacities. We also publish the content for public comment for 60 days. We just wrapped it up for our ocean theme. And we have upcoming one for waste management theme later this year. So there are various opportunities for you all to also be engaged in theme development. If you're interested, please do let us know. And we have a form that my colleague Grace just shared on the chat in case you want to take 30 seconds to sign up. So what does the working group focus on first? So I will share screen. All right, so the working group starts first with the strategic goals. The 4 strategic goals that you are seeing on screen, these are transformed from an initial list of 18 where we started. So through various combinations, discussions, debates, and research, we finally shaped these 4 in a way that they have broad outcomes that encompass the rest of the 14 goals that you no longer see here. And they are encompassed in various ways across the various dimensions of impact and associated indicators that Kellen just walked you through. And also, some of those 18 were already actually covered in Iris Plus themes that exist already, like agriculture and water. So since agriculture-focused themes already covered a significant part of climate adaptation topics quite well, what the working group did is focused on a gap that they identified, which was we didn't have any content on technology use in agriculture, which is a critical topic for climate adaptation, especially those working across scale. So this is the first time actually in Iris Plus we have a goal that focuses on technology. And we also have another strategic goal, which is the first of its kind in Iris, which focuses on communities directly. So when Windrock International, our theme partner, opened the conversation, the working group seemingly was super passionate from day one about doing the hard task of going with the beneficiary first approach and measuring impact on communities. Which is why we ended up creating this goal. And it's interesting because for those of you who are new to the 5 dimensions or new to Iris Plus, I would like to say for any of the outcomes as part of the 5 dimension, the who dimension covers the target communities or the stakeholders, people that are affected for any outcome. But they do not get directly focused on the outcome section at a what level or an outcome level. So they are actually kind of secondary part of a dimension of outcome, but not the outcome itself. So that's why it was interesting, because investors were actually really looking to explore this at an outcome level for the hard task of climate adaptation measurement. And that's why we ended up this first goal in IRIS. So without further ado, let's dive into a real example from a working group member. So that will help you understand, how you as an investor would navigate through this content for climate adaptation and resilience. So uh, let's assume you are an impact analyst who's looking to find the impact of an investment you made in with the topic of climate adaptation and resilience in mind. So you invest in, let's say, a tech-powered infrastructure, could be an irrigation systems or financial products or various combination of those, and you want to enable farmers to participate in sustainable food systems so that they're able to make food production more profitable, climate resilient, etc. So now, how does your theory of change look like in action? So the important part here is if your solution is implemented before a climate shock occurs, such as a flood or a drought, the infrastructure you invest in enables, let's say, irrigation access or additional capacity or crop insurance, and it can help improve the adaptive capacity of these farmers you're trying to target. And let's understand how. With irrigation, farmers are less and less dependent on erratic rainfall. Irrigation systems, especially those with water storage or drought resilient tech, would reduce yield loss during droughts. So farmers are more prepared. This actually diminishes the magnitude of payouts or potential losses, making the risk more manageable. So investors and insurance see this as a lower risk profile and are more willing to provide more and more financing or coverage. So you're essentially helping them more credit ready for other potential investors or financiers as well. So farmers now are better able to plan and invest in improved seeds or fertilizers and make stronger market contracts. Climate resilient irrigation that you're trying to implement can be also bundled with crop insurance or input financing. So investors and insurers accept some of the risk as part of this infrastructure's capacity to mitigate shock effects. So in the event of a climate shock actually occurring, it triggers the specific insurance policy threshold, and the farmers then receive a payout that helps to cover their losses and return to ideally the same or improved pre-disaster state. So now you as this investor will find these two climate adaptation and resilience goals super relevant. One is improving the capacity of communities to adapt to climate risk and increasing the agricultural resilience through technology. So, and also beyond these two, of course, in the framework builder of IRIS Plus, you will find additional content from agriculture or water and other related themes as well. And please do join our monthly demos if you'd like to learn more about how to do that. Now, so what headaches are actually bringing you to IRIS Plus? A common one for this topic would be complexity of measuring resilience and a general lack of evidence. Since resilience is so complex to measure, the working group was keen on measuring progress, again, which too can be challenging with shifting baselines in climate adaptation work. You see here after the shock has occurred, and then access to key community infrastructure that support livelihood, access to finance, or farmers' ability to generate yield, all improve the community's capacity to adapt to climate shock. So now, where do you start here as an investor, who has this headache? Yes, you would start in the evidence section. So let's say you are here and you, as part of this investment example, you're interested in building community food security, and where farmers are both contributors and an end beneficiary. So this is basically the section where you'll find various evidence for yourself to inform your investment strategy as well as your impact framework. And coming next is you would go to the core metric set, starting with the outcome indicator. So you start with this outcome indicator here, which is value of climate resilient community infrastructure. And here, the outcome we are looking at is increased capacity of communities to adapt to climate risk. So you will first need to understand what is the climate vulnerability status of the population you're targeting? Like, what brings you here? Because you're concerned about the climate vulnerability and you want to do something about it. So here's a metric that will help you understand that. And it's a very interesting metric. So one thing I will pause to note is you see this outcome indicator is actually measured through various combination of iris metric, and we do want all of these metrics to be used following this specific calculation guidance. So starting with the climate vulnerability status, which is a very interesting metric, and it was a crucial output of various working group debates and discussion. And it helps identify what the vulnerability status is for the infrastructure that they're going for. So I'll show you a quick peek. So this is the climate vulnerability status, very simple metric. Again, it's written to be applied to all IRIS Plus themes where this is relevant, not just the climate adaptation one. So you will see that it's made simple based on the three categories. And what is important also is to understand that the vulnerability status is important because as investors, you need to demonstrate that you actually gave the infrastructure you chose a serious consideration. So the working group was very, very keen on factoring the assessment of climate vulnerability into the selection of target population or solutions. So once you understand as the investor where the priority stands, you look into the different facility types and describe how this is either owned or used or managed by the community. So this is essentially the community facilities type metric here. And then you also have a metric that helps you understand the expected or actual damage to infrastructure and the value based on these steps. So this guidance here, you'll see there are different steps through which you identify these answers. What is the expected loss? How much of this loss has changed or improved as a result of your investment? So next, this guidance here will help you describe how you define this target. Who are you looking to benefit from here? So the guidance came out of several debates in the working group to understand what is critically measurable, critically usable in this case, and how to measure as possible. So here you'll see that there's a lot of text for investors to read and consider as part of understanding how to use this indicator and also how to inform their impact framework based on this. Just scrolling down now to the who section. This will help you further define your targets in terms of their geographical importance. So you have this metric target stakeholder, as well as several related metrics that help you define your stakeholders even further and helping you explain like who is a client, who is a target beneficiary, and like how do you engage with them. And the different audience you engage with. And it's really, really important to understand nuance in context of climate adaptation investments. Moving then on to the how much section. So here, what is very important to note is the number of people benefiting from community infrastructure being more climate resilient. It's a number, and then the percentage helps you understand the depth of impact your investments are having in the community you are targeting, because it is possible that the community you are targeting has 100 people, but the infrastructure ends up benefiting actually 30. So it's very important to, again, be able to measure the depth of your impact separately as well. So then before I get into the how is change happening section, I'd like to give a little more understanding of like how each of these metric get written. So for example, for another really interesting metric, which is adaptation needs assessment. So we initially, thought of making adaptation needs assessment or climate vulnerability status as a yes or no metric, like whether or not an investor has carried out adaptation needs assessment or whether or not an investor has carried out climate vulnerability status assessment. But then the working group was specifically super keen on not making it a yes and no question, but making it more nuanced than that and making sure that any IRIS user using these metrics is able to actually report on the specific adaptation needs that were assessed or the climate vulnerability status that was assessed. So as discussion went deeper with the working group, this was taken to the next level, and then we wanted specifically for any investment in climate adaptation to start with adaptation needs assessment and then linking the investment activities to the needs that has been assessed. So the calculation guidance here also helps you achieve that. So there's a lot of nuance in the way each of these indicators are written. So coming back to how is change happening, so this is basically different, various theories of change and impact investor uses to achieve this outcome. So you, as this specific investment example, the way you would target, you would have different set of metrics relevant from how is change happening, and another investor would have a different set of metrics. So this typically covers important subtopics like physical and economic assets, health, justice, food security, water security, disaster preparedness, or training and capacity building. So essentially, we think of it as what needs to happen first for the outcome to happen and the various pathways that different investors can take. So in this case, if I share like a couple of examples that will help you understand like what kind of working group inputs shaped these indicators. So first is we got huge recommendation from the working group to not just include the number of trainings hosted or number of people trained, but also what percentage of those that were trained actually reported improvement. So you see that percentage of people reporting improvement in disaster preparedness or percentage. So it's basically percentage of people reporting improvements in disaster preparedness or adaptive capacity as a result of investment activities. And this is as a result of the training. So separate indicators, but very important to actually understand quality and also depth. Similarly, there was a great interest in collecting direct feedback from communities about, how the activities on the ground are improving their adaptive capacity. So which is why this metric, this indicator was also created. Another important part is in the agricultural technology theme, which in the agricultural technology strategic goal, which you don't see here, but essentially there also for technology, we looked into adaptation and adoption differently. And we looked at how not just like technology is deployed and how many people are using it or how many people are trained, but also how many people are continuing to use it. So retention was a huge focus as part of like how is change happening as well. So for you as the specific investor, for you, the relevant metrics here would be, of course, food security, as well as physical and economic assets, indicators in adoption of livelihoods, financial inclusion, and of course, capacity building. And again, you're not limited to this. You're definitely using more than a different combination of these, and you're also looking at other strategic goals. Now moving on to additional metrics. So beyond these various tiers of change, we have considered there are always different diverted pathways that investors can take. So these additional metrics are not necessarily optional. They're not like second tiers, but they're basically some additional consideration you can make if you also end up taking a diverted pathway as part of this investment. So tying now all of this together, like from where we started with the outcome indicator to now, so for your tech-enabled infrastructure, you now have a list of indicators understanding how your investments improved the resilience of this infrastructure, starting with a before and after. So that concludes the presentation portion of this session, and we will pause now and open up for questions. And feel free to unmute yourselves or drop in on the chat.
Or if everything was all clear, that's also a good feedback, but really we love to hear your comments, or if we can go over any of the segments, any of the metrics. This time is for you.
Hi, everyone. This is Rachel here from GIIN Impact. I guess something that we've been wondering about is if there's kind of a common definition of resilience and of being better adapted, if there are, metrics or thresholds that we can use to, whether that's within geographies or across geographies that we can use to measure that. And so I see that these metrics are referencing those terminologies, but I'm not sure if I've seen if there's kind of a common definition around what those mean and especially how they've been applied in practice.
Thanks, Rachel. So we also have a glossary section that actually, let me drop it on the chat across IRIS. And it's very important because we spend a lot of time in the working group agreeing on these definitions, and it's also cross-tagged both in the metrics as well as in the overview section for whoever needs to read them. So it's super easy. For example, let me give you a quick tour. So for example, here for adaptation needs assessment, you want to understand, okay, how are we defining climate vulnerability or community? So like it will show you like a preview, and you can also click to continue further. Hope that answers.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, no, that's helpful. And I guess, so maybe my question is more around kind of like thresholds. Is there a point in which we consider them to be highly vulnerable after using the products or services that they are less vulnerable and therefore adapted, right? Yeah, I guess how do we know once, how do we apply those in practice?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So as you know that, the threshold has been a continued challenge to measure, especially in climate adaptation context with, shifting baselines. Generally,
Yeah.
we do have recommendations, and we did actually spend huge time discussing this. And at the time, there were also a lot of other climate adaptation focused frameworks that were grappling with the same challenge, and we also exchanged notes with them. And this continued to be a problem, especially for IRIS having to be applicable across context, as well as like various use cases. It can be difficult, but generally what we recommend, there are several methodologies that are used by investors that are generally applied locally or contextually relevant cases. The guidelines include some examples of
Could
that.
you also show again your screen and on the adaptation need assessment, and we can look at the usage guidance, and because there is a lot more information there. And to your question, Rachel, we don't specify a threshold. We say that it's a threshold. We recommend that a threshold be specified, and then we note what are some of the approaches that are typical and that are used, giving some references to that. This list provides a number of approaches that we're able to identify across the working group members that inputted what they are using. And at the end of this as well, you see some more references to toolkits that then provide some more methodological guidance and calculation guidance that you're able to leverage. And there will be, depending on the specific region or community, different approaches that will make sense. So we didn't feel, because of the level of because it's not context specific, let's say for Africa or for Asia or for a climate adaptation needs arising from a specific geography, that we're not able to therefore recommend a specific threshold. Rather, we give a list of what are some frameworks and reference to toolkits so that investors can look through those and decide which one is more appropriate for them. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you. That was helpful.
Thanks, Rachel. Spot on. Like, this is a really, really critical question.
Yeah, no, we're all grappling with it, I think.
Any other questions? Or comments, frustrations, anything?
So I hope the webinar has been useful for you. Please do give us your feedback if you have feedback that you would like to share with us. Also offline, online, we're happy to adjust the information and the presentation style for what is more effective. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, yes. As we mentioned at the beginning, this is a newer series for us, so feel free to reply to the reminder email you receive from Grace with any feedback, or Iris at the GIIN at any time. And yeah, stay tuned for this webinar posting on the IRIS website if you found this useful and would like to share with a colleague. We will also be hosting an additional session in June that will be hosted at 9 a.m. CET. I believe Grace will be sharing a link in just a second to register for that or to circulate to your colleagues. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining. Let me just pull in that registration page. So you all have it. It's the same link you registered for this session with, but a June session has been added. All right, well, thank you all and enjoy the rest of your days. So long.